1 minute to execution. The sky above the alien city was dark red. The air was heavy. In the center of the city stood a huge platform made of black stone. On that platform stood the Guillotine of Ragnor, an ancient machine, feared by all. Thousands of aliens had gathered to watch. They shouted and cheered. Some held signs. Some threw glowing dust into the air. It was not just an execution. It was entertainment. At the center of it all was a man, a human. His name was Captain Dallin. He was on his knees, hands tied behind his back, his head bent low. He looked weak. His clothes were torn. Blood ran down his arm. He had not eaten for 3 days. 2 large alien guards stood behind him, ready to push him into the guillotine's steel arms. A tall alien leader walked forward and raised his hand. The crowd grew quiet. "This man," the alien said loudly, "is guilty of treason against the Empire of Ragnor. He is not one of us. He is not even from this world. He is human." Boos and shouts filled the air. Dallin looked up for a moment. His eyes were tired, but not afraid. The alien leader pointed toward the blade. 1 minute remains. Say your final words, Earthmen." Dallin opened his mouth to speak. But just then, a voice shouted from the crowd. "Stop!" Everyone turned. A figure stepped out of the crowd. Slowly, calmly, fearlessly. Another human. He wore black armor and a long dark coat. A scar ran across his jaw. His eyes were sharp and full of fire. It was Commander Rhine, the only human soldier in the Ragnorian army. He had trained with aliens, fought in their wars, earned their respect. But now, he was doing the unthinkable. The alien leader narrowed his eyes. "Commander Rhine, this is not your concern." Rhine didn't stop walking. "He's human. That makes it my concern." The crowd whispered. Some gasped. No one dared speak to the High Judge like that. Rhine stood in front of the platform. He looked at Dallin, then turned to the alien leader. "He deserves a fair trial." "He had one," the leader replied coldly. "Guilty." That was the result. "Step away, Commander." "No," Rhine said. "I request trial by combat." The crowd went silent. Even the wind seemed to stop. One of the alien guards laughed. "That law is dead. It hasn't been used in over 300 years. It's still in your books," Rhine said. Page 97, Section 12, Line 4. "Any citizen of the Empire may challenge the outcome of a trial through combat, risking death for truth." The alien leader's face turned dark. He didn't like being challenged, especially not by a human, and he would fight for him. A man accused of stealing military secrets. Rhine nodded once. "Yes." "Why?" the leader asked. "Is he your brother? Your friend?" Rhine looked at Dallin again. Their eyes met. "No," Rhine said. "I've never met him before today." The crowd burst into chaos. "He's insane. Why risk your life for a traitor? He's one of them. Humans are protecting each other." The alien leader raised his hand again. Silence returned. "Very well," he said slowly. "You will have your trial by combat. Tomorrow, at dawn. If you win," he added, "he lives. If you lose, both of you die." Rhine nodded. "Agreed." Guards moved in. They grabbed Rhine roughly, ready to take him away for preparation. As they pulled him past Dallin, the prisoner whispered, "You're a fool." Rhine leaned closer. "Why did you do it?" Dallin looked down. "Because Earth is not ready. And the aliens, they're planning something worse." Before Rhine could ask more, the guards pushed him forward. The crowd began to leave. The show was over, until tomorrow. But deep in the minds of every alien who had watched, something had changed. A human had stood up. A human had dared to speak. And tomorrow, a human would fight. The only human in the arena. The night before the battle. The sky over Ragnor was cold and full of smoke. Fires burned in distant towers. The alien city was silent now, but the silence was not peace. It was tension. It was fear. Inside a stone-walled chamber deep underground, Commander Ryan stood alone. His armor had been taken. He wore only simple training clothes now. His wrists still had red marks where the guards had gripped him too hard. He looked at his reflection in the metal wall. Tired eyes, old scars, and a face that had seen too much war. A soft mechanical voice echoed through the room. "You have 12 hours remaining." Ryan turned away. He sat down, slowly, and breathed deeply. Outside the chamber, the world was watching. News of the human challenge had already spread across half the galaxy. Social feeds buzzed. Alien children asked their parents, "What is trial by combat?" Others whispered, "Will the human win? Why is he fighting for a traitor?" But no one knew the truth. Not yet. Flashback. 3 years ago. A younger Ryan stood in the middle of an alien training field. His body was shaking. Around him, 10 alien warriors circled. Each one was faster, stronger, deadlier. Again, the instructor shouted. Ryan rushed forward, dodged left, rolled under a spear, and landed a kick that knocked one alien back. But another grabbed his leg and slammed him to the ground. Pain shot through him. The instructor walked over. "You are human. That means you are weak. But if you learn to outthink them, you will survive." Ryan had never forgotten those words. Present time. Back in the cell. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. A tall alien with gray skin and glowing eyes entered. He wore a hood and walked with a cane. Ryan stood up. "Master Ultron." The old alien nodded. "You still remember me. You taught me to survive," Ryan said. "That's hard to forget." Ultron studied him for a long time. "Why risk your life for a man you don't know?" Ryan paused. "Because he's human. And because something's not right." He said, "Earth is in danger." Ultron stepped closer. Dalen didn't just steal data. He sent it to Earth. Military secrets. The kind that could start a war. Ryan's jaw tightened. Why would he do that? No one knows. But tomorrow, you face a champion named Korgoth. He is 7 feet tall, covered in armor, and has never lost. His claws can cut through stone. You cannot fight him with strength. "I wasn't planning to," Ryan said quietly. Ultron smiled. "Then come. We don't have much time." Training under the moonlight. Ultron led Ryan to a hidden chamber, an old temple built before the city itself. Inside, the walls glowed with symbols. Strange energy filled the air. "This place is forgotten," Ultron said, "but the old ways still have power." From a box, he lifted a weapon, the Mind Blade. A thin handle with no visible blade. But when Ryan held it, a silver light grew from the hilt, shaped by thought, sharper than steel. "It connects to your mind," Ultron warned. "If you lose focus, it cuts you instead of the enemy." Ryan gripped it. The blade shimmered, humming quietly like it was alive. Elsewhere, the royal tower. The alien king stood on his balcony, looking at the stars. Behind him, a soldier spoke. "The human might win. He trains with Ultron." The king didn't look back. "Then we make sure he doesn't." He tapped a button. A dark figure appeared on the screen, shadowy, with red cybernetic eyes. "Send in the shadow agent. If Ryan survives the arena, kill him." The next morning, the arena of Ragnor. Tens of thousands filled the seats of the arena. The structure was ancient, built into a canyon, with black stone walls and firelit towers. The crowd roared. Then silence fell as 2 gates opened. From one side, Korgoth entered, massive, with armor that hissed steam, and claws like daggers. His breathing was loud. His eyes burned red. From the other side came Ryan, calm, focused, holding only the Mind Blade. The High Judge stood between them. "Combat will end by death or surrender. Begin." The bell rang. Korgoth charged like a beast. Ryan dodged right, barely missing the first strike. The ground cracked where the claw landed. He rolled, turned, and sliced. The mind blade scratched Korgoth's arm. The crowd gasped. No one had ever drawn blood from the champion before. Korgoth roared and attacked again. Faster now. Ryan moved like water, flowing around hits, striking only when needed. He remembered his training. Use their strength against them. Be the storm, not the stone. After 10 long minutes, both fighters were wounded. Blood hit the sand. Then Korgoth made a mistake. He lifted both arms for a crushing blow. Rain ducked, jumped, and, with a full turn, drove the mind blade into the soft gap under Korgoth's arm. The champion fell. Silence. Then, the crowd erupted. Even some alien generals stood up and clapped. The High Judge stepped forward. Victory goes to the human. Commander Ryan. Ryan fell to one knee, breathing hard. Guards helped him up. One whispered, "You're a dead man walking now. They won't let you live after this." But Ryan only looked at the sky. "I didn't come here to survive," he whispered. "I came to wake them up." Later that day, back in the cell, Dallin sat on the floor, watching Ryan return with bruises and blood on his face. "You fought for me," Dallin said, "even when I told you I was guilty." Ryan leaned on the wall. "You said Earth is in danger. You need to tell me everything." Dallin looked away. Then slowly, he nodded. "The Empire isn't just ruling planets," he said. "They're building something. A weapon. Big enough to destroy a moon. And Earth is next. Training in shadows. Darkness hides many things. Pain. Secrets. And sometimes, hope. Deep below the golden towers of Ragnar's capital, beyond the city guards and beneath the firelit streets, a network of ancient tunnels stretched across the underworld like the veins of a sleeping beast. Here, in the dust and quiet, Commander Ryan walked with silent steps. His wounds still ached from the arena, but his mind was sharp, his eyes focused. Beside him, Dallin, the human prisoner he had just saved from execution, moved carefully through the narrow passage. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Finally, Ryan broke the silence. "You said Earth is next. What did you mean?" Dallin stopped walking. He placed a hand on the tunnel wall, feeling the cold stone. "The Ragnorian High Council, they aren't just expanding their empire. They're building something. A weapon. A weapon that could burn the sky off any planet." Ryan's jaw tightened. "Why Earth?" "Because we're still freed," Dallin said. "Because we're still human." Flashback. Dallin's mission. 2 years ago, Dallin had been a military scout sent to observe alien technology. He discovered a hidden space station orbiting the black moon of Velkar-9. It wasn't a mining station, as reports claimed. It was a weapons factory. Inside, he saw blueprints, massive energy cannons, planet buster bombs, anti-sun missiles. He copied everything and sent it to Earth. But the signal was caught. The Council found him, labeled him a traitor. Present. Underground hideout. Ryan and Dallin reached an old chamber lit with small crystal lamps. It was filled with stolen armor, alien tech, and rough maps of the city. Here, in the darkness, waited a group of strange figures. Rebels. Some were aliens with scars and torn robes. Some were half-mechanical beings, their bodies damaged by the war. And some were fully human, lost, hiding, forgotten. A tall insectoid alien stepped forward. "Commander Ryan, we weren't sure you'd come." "I did," Ryan said. "And I want to know what you've been hiding." The insectoid nodded. "Follow me." He led Ryan to a metal table covered in holographic maps. A planet rotated above it. Not Ragnar. Not Earth. "This," the rebel said, "is the Forge Moon." It was hollowed out. Its surface was covered in spiked buildings and black towers. In its center was a glowing core. "That core is a dark star engine," Dallin added. "When activated, It can fire a beam strong enough to melt a planet's crust. Rain stared at it. And it's ready. In 30 days. Silence. Then Ryan spoke. We stop it. Training in shadows begins. For the next 10 days, Ryan trained in silence. The rebels built him new armor, light but strong, laced with plasma wire and memory metal plates. It could repair itself in battle. They called it shadow steel. Each night, Ryan sparred with different rebels, fast ones, heavy ones, ones with cybernetic arms. He learned to fight not just to survive, but to lead. Ultron, his old mentor, returned and taught him how to command thoughts through the mind blade, how to sharpen it with emotion, how to make it an extension of the soul. If your heart wavers, Ultron warned, it will betray you. And slowly, Ryan began to change, not just into a fighter, but into something more. Meanwhile, the Royal Watchers. Inside the Ragnorian palace, the alien king watched a silent screen. On it, Ryan's image flickered, captured by hidden drones, trailing his every step. The king turned to his council. Let him train. Let him gather his rebels. But why? A counselor asked. Why not crush them now? Because hope is a flame, the king said coldly. And when it burns brightest, that is when it hurts most to kill. The test of shadows. One night, Ultron led Ryan into a pitch-black chamber. No lights, he said. No weapons. Ryan stepped in, blind. Suddenly, sharp claws slashed through the air. Ryan dodged, barely. A beast was in the room, invisible, fast, and angry. He moved by instinct, listening, feeling. Then he remembered Ultron's words, see with your mind, not your eyes. He slowed his breathing. He let go of fear. He reached and felt the air shift. A shape moved. He struck with his hand, caught it, slammed it down. Light returned. The beast was a training drone, but he had beaten it with no sight. Ultron smiled. Now, you are ready. A message from Earth. That night, a rebel technician ran in, eyes wide. We received a signal. From Earth. Rain rushed to the console. Static filled the air. Then a voice, shaky, distant. This is Admiral Juno. Earth Fleet Command. Your warning was received. We are mobilizing. Do not let the Forge Moon fire. Hold them until we arrive. You are not alone. The rebels around Ryan looked at each other, hope rising like fire. Ryan stood tall. You heard her. Earth is coming. But we must buy them time. Final scene. The enemy moves. Above the planet, in the darkness of orbit, a massive fleet began to rise from the Forge Moon. Dozens of warships, silent, deadly. The countdown had begun. Back in the tunnels, Ryan strapped on his armor. He looked at Dallin. You lit the fire. Now let's burn their lies to the ground. Arena of Fire. The day the city burned, it began with silence. Ragnar's twin suns had not yet risen. A gray mist covered the stone towers. The great arena stood cold and still, like a giant beast waiting to feed again. But deep beneath its foundation, in the old tunnels where no law reached, Commander Ryan stood with his new armor shining in the dim light. Around him, rebels prepared weapons. Some whispered prayers. Others cried as they loaded stolen rifles and charged energy cells. This was not just a fight anymore. This was war. Above ground, a trap is set. The High Council had made their move. They announced a second combat event in the arena. The people were told it was a reward, a show, a final test for the human who dared challenge the Empire. Another chance to watch him bleed. But the truth was darker. Hundreds of soldiers were hidden around the arena. Snipers on rooftops, shadow agents in the crowd, drones flying just out of sight. Their mission was clear. Kill Ryan. Kill Dallin. Kill Hope. Rebels rise. Just before dawn, Ryan stood before the rebel fighters. They were not an army. They were farmers, escaped slaves, broken warriors, and forgotten machines, but they had fire in their eyes. "We are not just fighting for Earth," Ryan said, his voice steady. "We are fighting for every voice they tried to silence, for every child they forced to kneel, for every world they've crushed." Dallin stepped beside him. "We may not all make it, but if we fall today, let it be loud." The rebels raised their weapons. Their cry echoed through the tunnels like thunder. For freedom. The arena awakens. Thousands filled the seats. Alien nobles, warlords, soldiers, and merchants gathered to watch another human death. Fire pits burned along the walls. Loud drums echoed. The arena's gate opened. Out walked Ryan. He walked alone, head held high, armor dark as shadow steel, the mind blade in hand. The crowd cheered, then gasped, because behind him, the second gate opened, and out came Dallin, wearing a stolen cloak, holding a plasma pistol. This was not part of the plan. Then the skies turned red. Explosion. Chaos. War. The arena's north wall exploded. Stone and dust flew into the air. Rebel fighters poured through the breach, firing from high ground. Plasma bolts lit the sky. Snipers on the rooftops were taken out one by hidden rebel marksmen. Civilians screamed and ran. Guards panicked. Some tried to fight. Others fled. The crowd became a stampede. But the shadow agents did not panic. They came for Ryan, the assassin in the smoke. A tall figure moved through the flames, wrapped in black, eyes glowing red, a curved blade in hand. It was the Wraith, the Council's deadliest assassin. Ryan saw him too late. The Wraith struck fast. Ryan blocked with the mind blade, but the Wraith moved like smoke, silent, deadly, untouchable. They clashed across the arena floor, sparks flying, metal screaming. Ryan was fast, but the Wraith was faster. "You fight for insects," the Wraith hissed. "You should have stayed in chains." Ryan bled from a cut on his cheek, but his eyes never left the Wraith. "I'd rather die standing than live on my knees." Dallin's choice. Dallin ran to the edge of the arena, covering rebels who were pushing forward. He saw Ryan fall to one knee. The Wraith raised his blade. "No," Dallin screamed. He jumped from the platform, firing his plasma pistol. The shot hit the Wraith's shoulder. Not enough to kill, just enough to give Ryan time. Rain rose with a roar, swung the mind blade in a wide arc, and caught the Wraith across the chest. The assassin fell, silent, eyes still burning, and didn't move again. Fire spreads through the city. Outside the arena, the rebellion was rising. Barracks were under attack. Guard posts exploded. Citizens joined the rebels, throwing stones, hacking systems, and opening gates. The streets became rivers of smoke and fire. One by one, the symbols of the Empire began to fall. The high tower falls. Ryan, Dallin, and the rebel leaders broke through the gates of the council tower. They'd moved fast before the enemy could regroup. Inside, they found the council's core terminal, a glowing data crystal connected to every ship and weapon in orbit. "This controls the Forge Moon's countdown," Dallin said. Rain stepped forward. "Can you stop it?" "No," Dallin said quietly, "but I can delay it. If I stay behind." Rain froze. "No, we do this together." But Dallin smiled, tired and full of peace. "I was the first spark," he said. "Let me light the fire." Before Ryan could stop him, Dallin pushed the emergency seal. The door closed between them. Rain hit the glass. "Dallin." But Dallin only nodded, placed his hand to the screen, and whispered one final word. "Live." Outside, the guillotine burns. The rebels dragged the guillotine into the center square. The same machine that had been built to kill humans now stood before the people, covered in fire. Ryan stood before it. He raised his blade and cut through its core. The machine exploded in sparks. The crowd watched in silence. Then, someone clapped. Another joined. and then hundreds. Thousands. Rain looked up at the burning city, the rising smoke, the ships above, and the fight still to come. This was not the end. It was just the beginning. Truths that burn. The fires still burned in the streets of Ragnor. Ash floated down like black snow. The sun was hidden behind smoke. The once golden city was broken now. Walls shattered, banners torn, its proud towers bleeding sparks and flame. But for the first time in centuries, the people could breathe. The guillotine was gone. The high tower had fallen. The human had survived. Yet in the shadows of that broken empire, the truth was still waiting to be heard. Ryan stood alone on the balcony of the rebel stronghold. His armor was damaged, his body exhausted, but he didn't feel tired. He couldn't. Not now. Below, the people of Ragnor were clearing rubble, treating the wounded, and burying their dead. Rebels moved among them, no longer hiding. But Ryan's eyes stayed on the sky. Above the clouds, beyond the broken towers, the forge moon waited, a weapon big enough to crack a planet in half. A timer counted down on a hidden screen. 27 days remaining. Inside the chamber where Dallin had sealed himself in, silence. The glass door was black now, covered in soot and cracks. No signal came through. Ryan stood there every morning. Sometimes he spoke, sometimes he just stared. He never got a reply. A rebel tech named Lyra pulled him aside one evening. She was a young alien, half mechanical, with golden eyes and a soft voice. "Commander," she said gently, "we decrypted some of Dallin's old files." Rain looked up. "And there's more. More than he told you. About Earth. About the Council. About the war that never happened." Rain followed her into the command room. A hologram lit up. It showed Earth, but not as it was now. As it had been 200 years ago. The hidden war. Lyra played the logs. The Council visited Earth long ago. Before humans even knew aliens existed. A secret mission. A test. The image changed. A small Ragnorian ship landed in an old Earth forest. Cameras showed young humans. Soldiers, reacting with fear. Then anger. Then fire. "They were testing us," Lyra said. "Testing whether humans could be controlled or broken." The test failed. The humans fought back, burned the ship, killed the team. One survivor made it home and told the Council one thing: humans will never kneel. And from that day, the Council labeled Earth as a threat. Not now, but later, when it grew stronger. They planned to wait, Lyra said, to let Earth grow, advance, then strike. Ryan's fists clenched. So Dallin wasn't the traitor, he said. He was the warning. Back in the shadows, a ghost returns. That night, a secret door hissed open. The rebels grabbed their weapons, but no enemy stepped through. It was Dallin, barely alive, burned, bleeding, but standing. Rain ran to him. "How?" "I rerouted the door seal. Used a decoy signal to fake my death." Dallin coughed. "Needed the Council to believe I was gone." Ryan helped him into a chair. "Why not tell us?" "Because what comes next is worse. The weapon isn't just for Earth." Dallin opened a file from a hidden drive in his arm. A new map appeared. Not just the Forge Moon, but a web of red lines spreading across multiple star systems. "The Forge Moon is the first," Dallin said. "But the Council built others, smaller weapons, mobile, hidden in trade ships, satellites, and outposts. They plan to do to other planets what they want to do to Earth, one by one, quietly. No war, just erasure." Ryan stepped back, stunned. "They call it the soft purge," Dallin said. "Clean, silent, no armies, just fear and fire." Ryan faced a choice. They could wait for Earth's fleet, which was still weeks away, or they could move now. Attack the Forge Moon. End it before it begins. The rebels argued through the night. Some begged Ryan to wait. Others shouted for revenge. But Ryan stayed silent. Until morning. He called a meeting in the arena, now broken, but still standing. Rebels, civilians, former guards, refugees from other planets. They all came. Ryan stood on the same stone where he once faced execution. Yesterday we rose to survive, he said. Today we rise to stop something worse than death. A future where truth is controlled, where freedom is bought, where planets burn quietly while the galaxy watches. He held up a stolen war map from the council. This is their plan. He threw it into the fire. We are the match. Preparation begins. The rebels got to work. Dallin, even weak, began reprogramming old warships. Lyra set up cloaking devices. Others trained night and day, knowing many would not return. Altrin, the blind warrior who trained Ryan long ago, handed him a small silver disc. This contains the override code, he said. If you reach the core of the Forge Moon, this can shut it down. Ryan took it, then looked at the mind blade beside him. It's funny, he said softly. They built this place to break me. Now we're using their own weapons to destroy them. Altrin smiled. That is balance. One final scene. The message. Before they left, Ryan recorded a message. To Earth, to the free worlds, to anyone still listening. He stood before the broken guillotine. The symbol of fear, now a symbol of defiance. My name is Commander Ryan. I was born on Earth. I was trained in Ragnor. I fought for their empire, until I saw what it truly was. He paused. They think silence is strength, that if they erase us quietly, no one will rise. But they forgot something. He turned, looking directly into the camera. Humans don't run. We don't bow. And when we burn, we take monsters with us. The guillotine turns. It began with an execution. Now it ends with a war. 30 hours before impact. The Forge Moon rotated slowly in the darkness of space, cold, massive, and silent. Its outer shell looked like black armor. Beneath it pulsed the heart of the weapon, a dark star engine, glowing faintly red. Deep inside that moon, machines moved like insects, building, charging, humming with deadly power. A countdown blinked on the main core. 26 hours until the weapon fired on Earth. Back on Ragnor, the launch. Commander Ryan stood inside the rebel hangar. Ships stolen from the Empire sat ready, patched with scrap, held together by hope and courage. Not a real fleet, but it would have to do. His team gathered around him. Dallin, tired but alive, loading final data into the strike plan. Lyra, locking in coordinates with shaking hands. Altrin, blind but calm, holding the last mind blade ever forged. And Ryan, wearing dark armor, standing taller than ever. This was it. We're not an army, Ryan said. We're a spark, but fire always starts small. The rebels boarded their ships and rose into the stars. The battle begins, outer orbit of the Forge Moon. As the rebel fleet exited warp space, alarms blared across the enemy base. Hundreds of Ragnorian defense drones launched like a wave of black knives. Lasers cut across the dark void. Explosions lit up space like falling suns. Ryan's ship spun through the chaos, dodging incoming fire. Stay in formation. Lyra called out over comms. We hit the shield array first. Dallin, in the second ship, hacked the targeting systems mid-flight. I've got control of one of their towers. Turning it against them now. A huge defense cannon rotated, then fired on its own side. Breach. After 20 minutes of brutal fighting, Ryan's ship slammed into a docking port on the Forge Moon. We're in. Ground team, move. The doors opened. Smoke, darkness, silence. Then Ryan and his strike team stormed into the heart of the enemy. Inside the moon, the core path. The interior was unlike anything they'd seen. giant black halls, humming red lights, and endless tubes filled with glowing energy. As they ran deeper, Ryan kept his hand on his blade. We stick to the plan. Ultron and I take the core. Dalen heads to control. Lyra stays with comms. We don't split unless... Bam! An explosion rocked the hallway. Half the team was thrown back. From the smoke stepped something new. Mecha Guardians, alien machines fused with old council warriors, bone and metal. Eyes red, voices gone. Dalen gasped. Those were once people. Ryan tightened his grip. They still are, and we free them today. Split paths. One mission. The team scattered. Ryan and Ultron fought their way toward the core. Dalen broke off into a narrow hallway, hacking systems and dodging security drones. Lyra stayed behind, but heard something. Footsteps. She turned and saw someone she never expected. A rebel. One of their own. Holding a gun. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "They offered me Earth." Betrayal. A gunshot echoed. The screen went black. Core chamber. The final climb. Ryan and Ultron reached the heart of the Forge Moon. A massive chamber with a red energy ball floating midair. Around it were control rings rotating slowly. Below it, the ignition core, ready to fire. Ryan held the override disc, but the system was locked. "We're too late," Ultron said. "No," Ryan whispered. "We're right on time." Suddenly, the platform shook. Giant walls unfolded. Defense drones descended from the ceiling. The system was alive, protecting itself. Ryan activated the Mind Blade. Ultron did the same. They fought side by side, teacher and student, like dancing fire and steel. But one drone got through. Ultron stepped in the way. "Ryan, keep going." The blast hit him hard. He fell to his knees. Rain caught him before he hit the ground. "No," Ultron smiled. "Every empire falls. You just have to push." Then he was gone. Elsewhere, Dalen's last move. Dalen reached the command hub. His fingers danced over the console. He activated the signal. Earth's fleet would know where to strike. He uploaded the override key. Then, he saw the security feed. Lyra, bleeding, betrayed. His jaw clenched. He whispered into the comms. "To the one who pulled the trigger, I hope Earth finds you first." Then he pulled a wire from his arm, connected it to the core, and began to overload the system. The guillotine turns. In the control room, Dalen had one final move: reroute the energy from the core, not to fire at Earth, but at the Council's own strongholds, their backup fleets, their home vaults, their hidden moons. He turned the blade, and just before the system could resist, he looked at the screen. It flashed red. Target, Ragnor Prime. Confirm. Dalen closed his eyes. Burn it all. He hit TONFIRM. Final escape. Rain ran from the collapsing core chamber. The walls cracked. Fire shot from the floor. Drones exploded in chain reactions. He found Dalen, dying, but alive enough to see the light shift outside the window. Dozens of enemy structures, exploding. The Forge Moon had turned on its masters. Rain grabbed him. They jumped into the escape pod, just as the core behind them turned white-hot. Above, in orbit, Earth's fleet arrived too late to fight, but not too late to witness. They saw the Forge Moon tearing itself apart, and one escape pod flying through the fire. Final scene. Back on Earth, news spread like a storm. The human who defeated a weapon. Ragnor Foals. The Guillotine Turns. But Ryan didn't care about headlines. He stood at a quiet hill outside Earth's first galactic station. He carried Ultron's blade on his back, Dalen's dog tag around his neck. People asked what they should call him now. Hero, Rebel? Legend? He gave the same answer every time. I'm just human, and we don't stand by. One human stood. Sometimes history remembers a war, but sometimes it remembers a moment. 3 days after the Forge moon fell, the galaxy changed. Across 100 systems, screens flickered with the same image. The burning ring of the Forge moon collapsing inward. The rebel fleet escaping through flame and debris. A single human, standing at the edge of it all. For centuries, humans had been called weak, lesser, wild. But now, they were something else. Unstoppable. Earth's response. Back on Earth, the first message from the High Command was simple. To the citizens of the Galactic Empire, we do not seek war, but we will never bow. Ships were launched, diplomats activated, emergency codes sent to colonies. Earth was finally awake. But Ryan, he didn't go home. Not yet. Location: Ragnor, the ruins of power. The once great city was quiet now. No crowds, no banners, just ash, silence, and smoke. In the shattered square where the guillotine once stood, Commander Ryan walked alone. He looked at the broken metal, twisted and blackened, a monument of fear now melted into memory. Behind him, the people of Ragnor gathered slowly, not to cheer, not to protest, just to see him. He turned and said nothing. He didn't have to. Sometimes, presence was louder than any speech. A new council, or no council at all. Ryan met with rebel leaders and former Ragnorian governors inside what remained of the high tower. Tensions ran high. Some wanted revenge, burn every world that stood with the council. Others wanted peace, end the fight, let healing begin. But Ryan stayed quiet until a nervous voice asked, "What do you want, Commander?" He looked out at the city. "I want no more guillotines." The room fell silent. He didn't mean just machines. He meant systems. He meant fear. He meant history itself. Dallin's final words. That night, Ryan played a private message stored in Dallin's neural drive, recorded just hours before the Forge moon fell. "Ryan, if you're hearing this, I'm not sitting beside you anymore. That's okay. I don't need to be. You'll lead them, not with orders, but with the way you walk through fire and don't turn bitter. Promise me one thing. When they ask you what you are, don't say leader, don't say hero. Say human. And let them know that's enough." Ryan didn't cry. He just nodded. The galaxy responds. On far-off desert moons, slaves broke their chains. In sky cities above gas giants, crowds pushed back against their watchers. On water worlds, scientists sabotaged war factories. A wave was moving through the stars, not started by weapons, but by one act of defiance, by one human who stood. An offer from Earth. Earth's fleet commander, Admiral Juno, arrived at Ragnor in person. Her ship landed in the rebel capital, and she walked straight to Ryan. "We're ready to bring you home," she said. But Ryan shook his head. "I'm not done here." She raised an eyebrow. "You won the war." "No," Ryan said. "I stopped a weapon. The war, that's in people's minds, and I can't win that with missiles." She nodded, left him with a handshake, and flew back to the stars. The final challenge, peace or power. Ryan knew the truth. The galaxy didn't need a king. It didn't need a council built on fear or a new flag to wave above the ashes. It needed a space between the fire, where people could decide who they wanted to be. So he called for something that had never happened before. A vote. Planet by planet, system by system. No force, no guns, just a question. Do you want to be ruled? Or do you want to be free? A surprise answer. The first planet to answer was not Earth. It was a small mining colony on the edge of forgotten space, a place where aliens and humans had lived side by side for years. Their message was simple. We never wanted power. We just wanted to breathe. We choose freedom. That message went viral across the galaxy. Others followed. Freedom won. Again. And again. Legacy of the Blade. Rain returned to the broken arena one last time. He carried the Mind Blade, now cracked and dim, its energy fading. He walked to the center and placed it in the ground. He left it there, not because he was weak, but because he didn't need it anymore. Epilogue. Years later, children across the galaxy study the story of Ragnor now, not as a tale of death, but as a lesson. They ask their teachers, did he really fight a Forge Moon? Did he really stand alone in the arena? Was he really just human? And the teachers smile and say, yes, and that's why it mattered. Final scene. A new flame. On a small green planet, far from all the wars, Ryan sits beneath a tree. A child, not human, not alien, something beautifully new, runs up to him. Are you the man from the stories? The child asks. Ryan chuckles softly. No, he says, I'm the man who walked away from them. The child sits beside him. Will there be more stories? Ryan looks to the sky. The stars shine brighter than ever. Only if we earn them.